Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first Secret Sunday session for November. I am very pleased to be joined today by Matt from the Man Cave. And so just to start off, let's just see, Matt, who you are, who is the Man Cave, and just give us a little brief outline.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Thanks for having me, and well done to you and your mum for everything you're doing in Tweed Heads as well with this initiative. Looks like you've got a great following online. Thanks for inviting us on. We're based in Melbourne, Victoria. As I'm speaking right now, we're fresh out of lockdown, so there's a definitely renewed energy down here in Melbourne. But the Man Cave started in 2014 and basically started because we looked at what was going on with men's mental health even back then and saw the statistics, saw what was happening and thought this has to be preventable. Where there's a lot of services that are focused on fixing men when they really are on their last legs, when they're really struggling. How can we get back to the source of the problem? And the solution for us came from looking at teenage boys, looking at high school culture, looking at the sort of craziness that is high school, and then seeing how boys can heap on these layers of masculine armor to try and get through, and they never really learn to take it off. So Man Cave is fundamentally preventative. We work with teenage boys, and we also work with adult men now as well, but fundamentally preventative and focusing on giving boys and young men the ability to talk about their emotions, to recognize them, and also to help out their mates, and to do that in ways that maybe addresses some of the Australian challenges, the Australian ways that we go about things as men. And it's not to say that masculinity is wrong or that men are wrong. We don't believe that at all. But we do think about it as how can we help men embrace more of their humanity, more of the whole person. And so our main thing is running programs with boys in high schools. They're full day workshops. They start off with a lot of fun, a lot of games, sort of meeting the boys where they're at, a lot of banter. We run it with adult guys who are 18 to 35 years old who represent their own versions of healthy masculinity. We've got guys that are baristas in inner east Melbourne that'll whip up the best strong soy latte for you that you can look for. We've got guys that are studying literature at Melbourne University, but they're also head to toe covered in tattoos and from country Victoria, all the way to people that have immigrated here from Africa, Asia, Europe, that sort of thing. And the whole point of that group and those facilitators is to be positive role models for the boys and to show them there are so many different ways you can be a man. So yeah, that's a brief summary of who we are and what we do.
Wow, that's phenomenal, really. You talked about at the start that you found the statistics really alarming. What were those statistics?
Yeah, they're pretty confronting still, and unfortunately, because of the situation in Australia, they've gotten a little bit worse. So we know that every day 7 men take their life, and that was previously 6, but it's just increased. We also know that 1 in 3 women will experience domestic or physical abuse at the hands of their partner, and that 1 woman every week will die at the hands of their partner through family violence. We also know that men try to access healthcare services. 60% of men that have tried, that have taken their lives, actually reached out for help in the 12 months previous. So they are reaching out for help, but the help they're getting isn't necessarily working for them or meeting them where they're at or landing. And then eventually, obviously, things get worse from there. So we look at those statistics as the main thing that we want to prevent, which is why we work with the younger boys. But we also look at them as the outcome of some of the challenges we see with what it means to be a man. And so that's where we really start, is we don't go into rooms full of boys telling them that what you're doing is wrong, and if you don't talk, like you better, like you're going to be in trouble. It's like, hey, who recognizes there's this set of rules around what it means to be a man? Yep, 40 hands go up in the air. Okay, who enjoys playing by those rules? No hands go up. Who wants to find another way to relate to each other today? 40 hands go up again. Okay, awesome. Today we're going to talk about some of these rules that we inherited and about how we can grow beyond them so we can be better mates, we can be happier, and reach our potential as guys. So That's sort of how we try and frame it, because I think one of the challenges with this men's space is it needs to be approached in a positive, strengths-based way. So there's a real positive psychology lens that we bring to it. If we're just sort of being scared and feared into talking, then it's really not going to happen. No one's going to be wanting to move that way. So yeah, approaching it in a strengths-based positive way is really important to us, and also makes boys and men feel more excited about engaging in it, as opposed to just, freaking out or worrying that if they don't do it, things will end up pretty bad.
So you talk about men's rules. What are those rules?
Yeah, like, it's a good question. And we know what the rules are, but also it's so often when we look at working with a group of boys in the morning, usually we'll ask them, what do you think it means to be a good man? Write it down on a sticky note. We're going to get 40 of you to put up your sticky notes. Awesome. Now, what do you think it means to be a real man? The men that you see advertised in media and in Hollywood films and different things. Great. Good man, respectful, looks after his family, has a good job, exercises, stay healthy. Real man, drinks beers, gets in the piss, hangs out with his mates, a whole bunch of stuff. And that side's usually pretty entertaining and funny. But that's also the reality, which is that especially in a school environment, but generally speaking, there's expectations and there's sort of mixed messages. So it's about being strong, showing no emotion, if we talk about some research called the Man Box study, which looks at this box that men feel they're put into, and if they believe in their man box, then the outcomes for their mental health are far worse. It's being sexually active, being heterosexual and being homophobic, being physically really fit, being self-sufficient, showing no emotion. And we don't say that those things are always bad. Of course, sometimes you need to be self-sufficient and be able to look after yourself. But if we've also got things like homophobia coming up in groups of guys, then there's always going to be this weird sort of vibe in a group where they don't really fully want to get around each other because they're worried they're going to be called gay. And so then this is when those layers of rules around how you can and can't act as guys become really hard to act within. And this is when you hear people talk about the fragility of masculinity, is they're talking about, it takes so much effort to get your manhood, to be considered a man in your group, in your community, wherever it is. And it can take one little thing for that to shatter and for that to come into question. So yeah, when we know when guys believe in those rules, that it's far worse for them. And so we try and create that possibility outside of that to go, hey, you can actually talk about your emotions and still be a guy, and you can enjoy doing these things that aren't typically what a guy does, like doing drama, baking, cooking, like talking about your girlfriend in a really loving, kind way, that sort of stuff. And you're allowed to have those two things together. They don't have to be separate. So yeah.
How would you respond though? Because I think some people are brought up with those traditional beliefs that this is the way to be a man. What would you say to people that do see that as men being more feminine?
Yeah, what do you mean by the men being more feminine? Can you explain that more for me?
So what is your thought in the sense that men have the traditional beliefs that most of us are aware of, that they have to be tough and they have to be strong, but I guess what you're saying as well is that, no, you don't have to be that way. What is your response in the sense that should men show their feminine side even though they could be ridiculed for being more feminine?
Yeah, I get what you're saying now. Well, I think the first thing is that it really depends on the community you're in as well. I'm living in inner city Melbourne, but we work with boys across regional Victoria. We work with boys up in Northern Territory and across different parts of Australia. And we always bring the same sorts of approach to that work, but what comes up for that group is always different. I think the most important thing is there's nothing wrong with the traditional model of masculinity, so long as we expand that out to recognize that if you're always being tough, showing no emotion, and you're never actually taking off the armor, or as we like to talk about it, you're wearing a backpack and you put an emotional rock in that backpack every time something bad happens to you, or you're struggling, or someone hurts your feelings, you don't talk about it, that backpack's going to get pretty damn heavy. And no one can see the weight of that backpack on your back either. So if we don't sit down as guys and give ourselves the permission to take the bag off, pull out a rock and go, you know what? Someone said something to me the other day that really hurt my feelings. I just need to talk about it. I'm just going to chuck it out. Done. Then we know that guys walk away feeling lighter, feeling like they've processed it. But we don't necessarily have those spaces for guys to do that, or that space isn't created for them. So it's not necessarily about saying that model isn't working, but we need to expand the model out and make it okay to also go more open to the other side, which is, hey, I'm actually struggling today and I need to talk about stuff. And I don't really need you to give me advice. I don't really need you to rescue me. I just need you to hear me. And that's where it becomes challenging, not just for other guys to listen to their mates talk through that stuff without being like, oh, like I've got a problem. I'll help fix it for you. Which is often our response as guys. It's like, cool, there's a problem. I've got a tool. Let's fix it. But also for women as well, to be sitting there and going, oh my God, my fully grown husband, boyfriend, brother, mate is sitting here in tears. What do I do? This is not what I expected to see when I asked him how he was today. And so it's also about all of us becoming more comfortable with just allowing that person to talk about it without trying to rescue them. And that's, I think, how the whole community grows as part of this work. And that's still okay. And actually, when we observe men talking about their emotions really honestly and admitting to what they're struggling with, that everyone else around them goes, that is so courageous. Like, you just showed me what it means to be a man. But of course, as you alluded to, there's reasons that guys don't do it. And it can be that gets used against them in their group of mates. They get called a pussy, they get called, whatever you want to call it, but they get called out for being soft. And so that's the challenge. We need to create these spaces where it is safe, where you have role models, where you have elders, you have older men, especially in the community, that are holding space for the younger boys, saying, we're going to actually sit here and talk about this, and this is going to be kept confidential. And of course, you need to do it in a way that like meets guys where they're at. You can't just like be intense about it. But there are moments where it is that way. And I think that's one of the things that we want more of as well, is to see the men where they can, to support each other, but also to hold that space for younger guys. Long-winded answer, but yeah.
Young boys accepting this new environment and this new way of talking about their emotions compared to older men that have probably been exposed to more traditional beliefs for a longer period of time?
Yeah, we work across the range of age groups. I've worked with 12, 13-year-old boys, and I've also run workshops on this stuff with 70, 80-year-old men, where we're talking about the rules of masculinity. And these guys have lived through World War II. Like, they get it. They know how to be tough. And also with my dad, I introduced him to a tool once, which we use called a check-in. And the check-in is simply uninterrupted time for me to talk openly about how I'm feeling. The other person isn't allowed to interrupt me. They just have to sit there and listen. And I can take up as much time as I want. Now, you can set time around it, but if you have the time, 5-6 minutes feels like an hour when you're talking. The other person just has to sit there and listen. And that when you're finished, they can't give advice. They can't rescue you and say it's going to be okay. They can't ask questions. And I said this to my dad. I said, hey, we catch up for a coffee once every week or two, because he lives down in regional Victoria. I want to try this thing with you called a check-in. How does that feel? All you do is just uninterrupted talk about your emotions. How are you feeling? And he was in the army for 45 years and did a lot of work in that space. And he looked at me and just said, that sounds really scary. And I thought, oh, okay, I've maybe a bit drinking the Kool-Aid too much in the man cave world, had forgotten how scary it actually is to talk about it. I think the summary of the answer for that is that men want to talk, and that's a bit of a rule that we have to also break down and go, no, actually men do want to talk, but they need the permission and they need the space. And so we see it with, again, 12, 13-year-old boys, when we create the space for them, and it takes a few hours for sure, then they want to talk, and the things they say afterwards. So we'll hold that check-in, but we'll do it with 10 boys at a time. So they'll hear each other checking in. And without a doubt, at the end, they'll be saying, I had no idea we were all struggling with the same things. Like, now I feel less alone because I realized, but we're all going through the same challenges. Yesterday, I held a circle like that online for boys I used to go to school with, from 20 years old through to 70. I introduced that check-in idea. It was like, bang, 3 of them wanted to go straight away. So it's also some of the basic tools, but also the space and the permission, and someone that goes first, someone that creates that space through role modeling and going. Like, I went first with that session yesterday, and it was tricky because one of my best mates was on that call, and I was talking about some things that I said, look, hey, that's actually just needs to stay between you and I. And that's, of course, the challenge you alluded to, which is that these spaces need to be safe, confidential, trust built. And that can be really hard, especially when you think about the high school environment, where it's just like any little bit of gossip or banter, and yeah, you're in strife.
Yeah. What are the sort of pressures that young boys deal with in that high school environment?
It somewhat depends on where they are in and what kind of school they're at. But also there's a lot of common elements. One of the main ones, which I've already alluded to, is the banter, which is just the casual jokes, which are really, can be quite hurtful underneath. And also when the banter goes too far, especially when, you know, boys can start to be derogatory, not just to that boy, but also to the people around him. So we're seeing challenging of boys, throwing banter at each other. It's actually quite hurtful, not knowing how to respond to it. Also the challenge of having actual awareness of their emotional experience and going, there's this weird feeling in my body and I don't know like where it is, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know how to talk about it. And that's when we'll slow down and go, cool, like, well, where is it in your body? Okay, what's in your chest? Okay, what does it feel like? Oh, it feels quite tight. Okay, can you explain a bit more about that tightness for me? Like, what else are you feeling there? Oh, it feels like I can't really breathe. Okay, and so by tapping into the actual feelings they have in their bodies, that can be a much easier way to sort of step into then going, oh, I feel tight in my chest and my body because I feel like there's some stuff I want to talk about that I can't. Okay, well, what do you want to talk about? So like really giving them some of those basic tools for actually feeling it, and not just feeling like what I know a number of guys can feel, which is just this numbness, which is that everything's numb. I don't know what I feel. And so we see that not so much with younger boys, but certainly with guys that are in their 20s and 30s and older, who haven't tapped into that for a while. The other thing we see is feeling really misunderstood by adults, especially during COVID, where boys are missing their mates and they can't connect with them through social media or gaming because their parents want them to get off technology. We asked 500 boys last term that we worked with, what do you want adults to know right now that you're struggling with? And the 2 top things were homework and study is really hard right now, doing it from home. And I'm on gaming and social media because I want to connect with my mates and I can't see them right now. So we're also seeing that right now, boys are really missing their friends. And that's obviously one of the main reasons they love going to school.
Yeah. Wow, it's interesting because as a female, you often have different experiences as well. But the pressures are incredible. I also want to touch a little bit on, are you finding an increase, or have you been aware of boys being pressured and feeling more conscious about their body image?
Yeah, I know this is really relevant and close to your heart as well. We see it in workshops a bit, but we also know it from the research that there is a lot more pressure on this generation coming through now around body image for boys, and I think you probably know more about this space than I do, even when it comes to the experience of boys. But yeah, we see it. We see it in the sense of, to be a man is to be physically strong. And especially when we walk into a room of boys, the alpha is not always, but often the biggest guy in the room, because he's got physical power. physical strength, and that sort of gives him that ticket of alpha male. The challenge is that when that becomes obviously like a really core part of their identity, that they can't escape it, and it becomes a part of the obsession of needing to go to the gym, eat really well, and ultimately what that can lead to is feeling really lonely, not feeling connected to their mates, and then that sense of loneliness and loss of hope is where the downward spiral really starts. So yeah, we do see it. I don't have as much experience in how to actually manage it though.
Do you see a lot of young kids that are pressured by what they want to do with their life and where they want to go, especially in that high school period where some of their friends might be leaving school, or it's getting towards the end of their high school experience, and sort of losing that motivation and loss of purpose?
Yeah. We ran a session last night with Year 12 boys who have lost so much in Melbourne, not had graduation dinners or valedictory dinners, and we created the space for them to like process the year. What the hell has this year been? What do you want to take forwards? What are you grateful for? And also, what do you want to honor in each other? What strengths have you seen in each other throughout this year? Like helping them relate to each other in a really positive, constructive way. The thing we probably see with going forwards is what we really focus on with the boys is not so much what occupation do you want to specialize in, although they often we'll ask them what kind of man do you want to become at the end of the day, and we'll get them to write that in the basis of values or strengths. So if you think about meeting yourself in 10 years time, what kind of guy do you want to meet? What kind of values does he show? And they often say things like he's loving, he's caring, he's got a good job, that sort of stuff. And occasionally we'll get a boy that says, oh, I want to be a professional skateboarder or something like that. But I think the challenge for young people that we do see is that a lot of what they learn at school is not necessarily going to transfer directly into a job. And we also think there's a big missing mark in education of young people of the social and emotional skills that are necessary to be effective in the real world. And I don't know about you, but I learned way more at school and at university on team assignments where we actually had to work together with other people than I did like just trying to do a straight up maths research assignment. So yeah, we think that's one of the missing gaps in working effectively together, and especially for boys where they might relate to other men as competition, and as wanting or needing to be in control is one of the key challenges we see with boys, and giving them permission to not be in control, and that's still okay. They've still got their masculinity intact as a result of that. That's some of the key stuff that can help them work more effectively in groups or work more effectively with other men, obviously form more enjoyable relationships in general. And that's kind of how we approach it. But we don't necessarily approach it from what kind of job do you want to get? The values, we hope, sets them up for success to then make decisions that align with their own goals and aspirations.
How do you ensure that boys and men, after they come and see you or go through a program with you, keep up their values and ensure that they break down the masculine stigma? Because I suppose you get taught in the moment and you can get, I guess, wound up in all the hype, but then how do you ensure that keeps on going? Yeah,
it's been an ongoing challenge for us. We really do think that the full day and even longer sometimes experiences are really important, because that's where we get the space to unpack those attitudes and belief systems, and we can't possibly help them move forward without it. But then the challenge comes with that is how do you help them integrate their learnings into their everyday life? There's a few things we do. The first one is at the end of the workshop, they'll get a business card that has support services on it. So they can put that in their wallet, and it has our logo on it, just sort of remind them of us and connect back to the experience they have with us. And at the end of every workshop, we'll say to them, hey, who can you go to for support if you need it? Because we're about to leave. who can you go to for support? And we'll often get them talking about parents, teachers, brothers, sisters, their mates, obviously, as well. We've just started up a new Instagram account called Man Cave TV. And the whole point of that is getting teenage boys, meeting boys where they're at on social media. There's Instagram, TikTok, soon to be YouTube, with our facilitators creating the content. And the point of that is that the boys continue to connect into and observe healthy male role models, where they can have the banter and the fun, but also then do a really authentic check-in. And they continue to see that being role modeled. So the goal for that is to get thousands of boys following us after our programs, so they continue to observe that. I think one of the last parts we are now building out as well is working with teachers and educators. The role of the teacher, we really want to expand out to being an educator and an elder for young boys and for young women and for all genders in the education system. So working with teachers to give them the skills to hold that space, to engage with boys when they're misbehaving in a way that's constructive, and to hopefully use some of the principles that we're using working with boys after we've gone. So we're now building out online training. I know, like everyone else, but it's going pretty well. And that will support the teachers also then being able to run things like a check-in or other things we might develop after we're gone. Yeah.
Do you think it's even more difficult for a young boy to, I guess, go through a program or a day program, like you said, and then go home to an environment where the mum or the dad don't agree with what you're teaching?
Yeah, that's super hard. And we do try and get the message to parents. We'll send them resources. We have done parent presentations before and had mixed levels of engagement with different groups. That is the real challenge. I mean, they spend most of their young lives before they move out of home at home and at school. And so we can work effectively with teachers and parents, definitely. The challenge is, especially if those parents have got those older models of gender and those really strict models of gender roles, that it can be really hard for that boy to then integrate his vision for what kind of man he wants to become if it doesn't align with what his parents believe. So yeah, it's a challenge. It's an ongoing one.
Yeah. Now I sort of want to touch on a little bit of advice from your perspective in the Man Cave, and just helping anyone out there that may be watching this who is a young boy, for example, and just what would be your advice to a young person, a young boy who would be watching this and just thinking that, yes, he has a lot to share with the greater world, but he's stuck with that stigma side of things and doesn't want to put down his masculinity and be seen as feminine?
Yeah. The first thing I'd say to those boys is that we see you, and that we know that we know the goals and desires that you have. So if there is anyone watching that is younger, that feels that way, that we see you. And there's a few different, it's a really good question. There's a few different things I would say that I think would help. The first one is if you feel inclined to actually journal about some of these things. So to express them in your own way. Journaling has a bit of a stigma around it itself, like something pretty we do. We buy a nice diary from KKK or whatever it is and like write down these beautiful memoirs. But really, like when I open my journal in the morning, I'll go, what's in my mind? What do I need to talk about? And I'll scribble, draw, whatever it is that helps me process it. And we know that journaling definitely helps with processing anything that's going on in your head, and is a key part of therapy and different approaches as well. So if you're a boy that wants to actually work some stuff out, get out a pen and paper and just start to write it out. The other thing is to reach out to a guy your age or someone that's older that you really trust. I had a few really good cousins and family friends when I grew up, where I had some really informative conversations with them because they were willing to talk about it, and to ask them questions and to talk more with them if you feel like you want to talk about it. The other thing is to find people that feel the same way you do, which I know can be challenging because there's often this social wall between that, but to do things that you really love and enjoy, and to trust that if you go and join that club or go to that part of town, or hang out with that person that you connect with, but hopefully you meet more people that really connect with that. One of the greatest reliefs I had was when I finished high school and I went to university and got to hang out with all these people that were like-minded. They're really passionate about the same stuff. And it's definitely a challenge when you're still at high school and you're just forced into a classroom with the boys from your local town. So that's probably a few things I can offer, apart from following us on Make TV.
What about parents that maybe, I guess, watching their young boy that may be experiencing something and they don't know what to do in the situation?
Yeah, it's tricky for parents as well, because boys there's the sweetest little things talking about everything, and then around 13, 14, 15 they just get to the grunting stage, where it's like, how was your day? Good. What do you want for dinner? Don't care. It can be really hard as a parent to actually get your son to then start talking and to know if he's struggling or not. The number one advice I'd have for parents is to, when you ask your son, how are you, or how is your day, or what are some of the things you're struggling with right now, whatever it is to hold back the advice and hold back the rescuing. So often, I've got a 14-year-old sister, and said to myself, I will use some of the skills I've learned in working with teenage boys and working with her. And I'll actually just ask her, what do you need from me right now? So how are you? This is how I'm feeling. Cool. If she brings up something that she's struggling with, and I say, I think this works with boys as well. What do you need from me right now? Do you need me to give you advice? Do you need me to help you? Do you need me just to listen? 90% of the time, it's that I actually just need you to listen. And the wonderful thing about opening up that conversation without repercussions, or with a boy starting to learn that he can share things with you without there being any outcome of that, the more he'll start to come back and share more and start to talk with you, because he knows he can just think things through. So that would be my number one piece of advice there. The other one I would say, because I know that can be hard, and we've all got an advice monster going off in the back of our head saying, I know exactly, I've seen this problem before. The other two things I would say is share stories as a way of giving advice, or share stories as a way of sharing your wisdom. So, telling a story about when you've struggled with the same thing, you're not trying to say you understand exactly what he's going through and you know how to fix it, but you are saying, you're empathizing with him in a way of saying, yeah, I had that problem when I was at school also. This is what happened. This is how I dealt with it. And that's it. Nothing on the end of saying this is what you should do. He'll take from it what he needs to. And that's also a way of building your relationship and him understanding you a little bit more. Most children, I would say, don't think their parents had a life before they were born. So to learn that they were also a teenager once is quite a revelation. And then the last one I would say is, where you can, bring in other healthy male role models for your son to be around. And again, he will just pick up so much from just being around them and seeing them. Doesn't necessarily need to, they don't need to go out and have a coffee together. He can just be coming over for dinner, or be a mate of the family, and him observing another healthy adult male will make a big difference. So if you can do that as well, then that will give him another model for what it looks like to be a man. I had some amazing role models. I didn't realize it. I had like 6 uncles when I was growing up around my dad. I thought they were all actually my uncles, and of course didn't realize that they were just dad's good mates. So that would be my last suggestion for parents.
And what about a child that's maybe seeing their father going through something that they don't know what to do in that situation? What advice would you offer them?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I would say first and foremost to that child that it's not your fault, that what's happening with your mum or your dad or an adult in your life is not your fault, and that you're not responsible for fixing them either. That actually the main responsibility you have is to be a kid. and to enjoy those things. And I know some young people can have their adolescence taken away from them because some very adult things can happen in the world without them choosing. The other thing I'd say to that young person is that there is help. So if you need help and you need to actually speak with someone, that you can go online, and there are forums and help services to talk this stuff through. It's hard for a young person in general because often they don't have as much control or choice in their lives. And so, like for me, I struggled through some family challenges when I was younger, and also challenges at school. And it was horrible at the time because I couldn't escape it. And I had to learn to manage my emotions. And I learnt about that space between an event that happens and my reaction. And that in between, in that space, there was a bit of solace, there was a bit of calm that I could create in myself. So if you need it, then know that there is that space in between, but also know that after you've been through something that might be tough, you're going to need to talk about it. You can't just sort of push it down. So hopefully having someone that's either a friend or a family friend that you can talk to, reaching out to them and speaking to about it. But it's particularly hard for young people because of what I've already mentioned.
Yeah. I think we have this culture as well where we bottle it up until eventually it explodes and then we seek help. How do you, I guess, tell someone to get help in those initial stages, and how would someone know to get help?
It's I would say that it starts with we talk about self-care and mental health and all these sort of really important ideas, but that have maybe been spoken about so much that it's hard to really put them into practice. I'd say first and foremost is recognizing your emotions and recognizing the cause of them. Sometimes our emotions are really make a lot of sense. Sometimes we feel anxious because Dan Andrews has just changed the lockdown restrictions, and I don't know what that means for like where I can travel, who I can see, and of course I feel anxious today. Okay, now that makes sense. I can understand the cause of my emotional experience right now. The challenge then is if I don't understand where it's come from, and actually I wake up in the morning and I feel that way, that's a bit more confusing, and that can feel like we don't have as much control. Like almost everyone at the Man Cave, staff, facilitators included, will have morning and evening routines, which is just a really simple way of bringing in some consistency. When I was 14, I really struggled with just waking up and going, how am I going to feel today? And I hate the fact that I can't predict this. So it doesn't need to be done in a really intense Buddha-like fashion. It can just be doing some really basic things in the morning that set you up for success throughout that day. And the same in the evening, so you sleep well. Knowing when to get help is a bit of a paradox as well, because we do like to think that we can just solve it ourselves. At the start of lockdowns, that's exactly what happened to me. I was lost, felt like I was doing the morning and evening routines, wasn't working. I was still waking up feeling anxious and uncertain. And I messaged a mate and said, hey, can we catch up, go for a run? And I said, look, I'm actually really struggling. I actually sent him a text before I caught up with him so that he knew what to expect, and so that I was also kind of giving him permission to ask me. And it was quite hard because I like to see myself as someone that's self-sufficient, to admit that I was really struggling. So if you're thinking about the fact that you need help or you're struggling yourself, then it's best just to ask. The tricky part about that is reach out to someone that you feel can really hold you in talking about this stuff. Often when we are about to talk emotionally about something that's close to our hearts or makes us feel nervous, our blood pressure, our heart rate, everything increases as if we're about to go into the ring and get in a boxing match, because our bodies are gearing up for this battle we're about to fight, which is also why we end up so exhausted afterwards. So if you can, reach out to someone you know is going to be able to be comfortable holding that space for you to talk and to let it out. And sometimes it can help to, write this stuff down on a page. So we haven't shared it publicly yet, but we've built out just a mental health plan, which isn't like a Medicare thing. It's actually just a one page on, what do you do on a good day that helps you have a good day? When do you know you're struggling? Who can you speak to if you are struggling? Personal friends, and also contact services. And what will you need to hear when you're struggling from yourself? So also some of that self-coaching. So capturing some of that stuff when you are in a really good space can be really helpful. It's important to not get caught up in the happiness trap, the positive psychology trap of, if I feel bad, then I'm a failure. No, we're always going to have positive and negative emotions. The part of the learning is going, okay, well, how do I just sit with this and accept it? I don't know if you've heard of ACT or whether your followers have heard of ACT, but one of the ideas in that is to write down what you're actually struggling with on a piece of paper. Imagine holding it in front of your face here and imagining how to try and engage with life right there and then. Well, you can't, because you're so caught up in it. So if you can learn to actually then physically put that piece of paper on your lap, you're still acknowledging it's there, but you can still engage in life as well. So some basic exercise like that can help. But I know maybe that exercise in itself is really powerful.
Yeah. How do you, I guess, educate people as well that if a friend did come to you and said, look, I am struggling, what is that person in that position supposed to do? And when is it okay for them to seek help for that person?
Yeah. Again, this is you need both sides, right, to have this conversation. First of all, it's sort of just reinforcing the same ideas of saying, when someone comes to you for help, you need to decide early on, as that person being sought out, whether you can help that person or not. So if it is really serious, recognizing and seeking permission from the person needing help to bring someone in that might be more experienced, whether it's the school counselor, whether it's a trained professional, or whether it's an adult, that's important. But always asking permission before doing that. But even before you get to that point as well, just recognizing you don't need to have the answers. You don't need to save this person. You actually just need to see them for what they're struggling for. So much of what our human experience comes down to, not just men, but our human experience is being seen by someone else and being heard. And you don't need to have the answers. So if someone does come to you struggling for help, be prepared to ask a follow-up question. If someone says, hey, I'm really struggling today and I don't know what's going on, be prepared to ask them, or, what's been happening in your life recently. What we tend to do is in response go, oh man, that sucks. I'm sorry to hear. Anyway, where do you want to get a coffee from? And that's it. And the window's closed. And sometimes it can take the person that's willing to go there to sort of go again and say, actually, I do really need to talk. But recognizing that moment when someone shares, if I can be present and aware of exactly what that person's coming to me with, then asking that second or third question and actually just slowing down a little bit. I think that's been one of the benefits of the current climate we're in, is that people have slowed down. We've seen inside each other's homes thanks to Zoom, and we're recognizing that there is a whole human there. And we're asking, how are you? I'm actually just here to listen. But importantly, if you do recognize that person does need serious help, if you feel comfortable, you can ask them, have you thought about committing suicide, or have you made plans? If someone's thought about it, that's a concern. But if that person's made plans, then that's when you really need to call emergency services, or Lifeline or Beyond Blue, because that's when that person really is in danger. The important thing, as you sort of alluded to as well, is to ask permission for that person to do that, because they need to be enrolled in the process. Otherwise, they might just go off and leave you. So, yeah.
Quickly, at the start, you talked about domestic violence and that having a correlation with men's mental health. Is domestic violence, is there a line between the two, in the sense that masculinity comes with the domestic violence side of things, so the loss of that masculine sense comes from people then acting out through domestic violence? Because I'm just unsure about that.
Yeah. And what I should say as well is that the Man Cave as an organisation really specialises in the space of mental health, preventative mental health and emotional intelligence. And we don't specialise in working in the space of domestic or family violence. What I can say from our lens of the Man Cave, without going into that world, is that when, if men feel like they need to be in control in a relationship with a partner, then that can lead to some of those impacts. So if we can help men realize they don't need to be in control, then they can hopefully form more of a partnership, and there's more of an equality within that relationship. And I say this not just about heterosexual couples, but also homosexual couples and all other genders as well, and sexual preferences. There's always going to be a power dynamic within relationships. But from a masculinities lens, if we can help men understand they don't need to be in control to be a man, then hopefully they're going to be far more inclined to see a woman as an equal, and also see other men as equals and not needing to get power from them, which then allows them to obviously talk about their emotional experience, but create a partnership within a relationship. And the outcomes of that, we hope, will reduce things like family violence. But maybe I'll just cap it off by saying that's not a special space of ours, but it's definitely a reason we do this work.
Do you think men lose their identity then if they lose their sense of control in a relationship with a female, if, just say, the female becomes more dominant?
Now we're going down some interesting paths, aren't we? I'm conscious of where this might go into personal opinion versus Man Cave perspectives.
Just in terms of masculinity, I guess, if you lose that and you become more, you switch the perception of it and become, I don't want to say feminine, but do more feminine things as they're described. Is that loss of identity affect men, do you think?
I think the key phrase is that you use at the end there was a loss of identity. It's a confusing time for guys because the rules were really clear and the rules have now changed, and the rules changing have meant far greater freedoms and possibilities for women, which is amazing. And I'm so glad for that, for every woman that's in my life as well. But that's also then led to men feeling like there's a bit of a vacuum and going, well, hang on, what does this mean for my role in the family, my role in society? So it's the loss of identity is not necessarily that. They're not losing their identity. The identity of masculinity or being a man is actually just shifting, and we're still trying to work it out. The approach that I take with my partner, and something that's been really important to me, is that we take a partnership approach to our relationship. And like, there's certain things that I love doing that she doesn't, and certain things that she loves doing that I don't. And we don't really put a gendered lens on them. Like, sometimes we might joke about it, but it's always about how do we play to our strengths and our preferences and enjoy our time together. But also, I dearly love her, and I'm willing to say that in front of my friends. And I'm also willing to not talk about her like she's the ball and chain. I've actually chosen to be with her. I'm bloody grateful I am. And I'm going to be proud of that. And that's still being a man. Actually, that's being more of a man than referring to your partner as someone that's holding you back. Yeah. So I don't think it's necessarily the loss of identity, but I do think it's that the men's identity is that we're asking them to evolve into a new version of masculinity. Yeah. And we're still trying to work it out. Yeah.
That's amazing. You saved yourself there. No, I'm joking. We're going to wrap it up here today. So thank you everyone for listening and tuning in. So where can we find the Man Cave, and what's going on in the near future that we could possibly have access to?
Yeah, you can find us online at themancave.life. We have free resources, which are 100% free, on our website, and they talk about the check-in, another 2 tools called a clearing and an honouring, and they've got great videos and guides online, so you can go have a look at those. If you're on Instagram, you've already heard mancavetv.au is our Instagram, and we've also got an Instagram for the actual organisation itself, just the mancave_au. So yeah, you can follow us online there. We are starting to run more adult training online through our training academy. So if you're interested in that, email us. And yeah, we are hoping to and planning to come to New South Wales and to expand out nationally. In the next 3 years, our goal is to be available Australia-wide. So if you want us to come to a place like Tweed Heads or Surrounds, then let us know, because yeah, we want to create that possibility in the next few years.
Well, we definitely want you here, so got me on board.
That's good.
Well, thank you very, very much for attending today, and for us, being still inside and choosing to stay inside to talk to me, because I know you can go out a little bit more. So I really appreciate you being here today. And I appreciate everyone else out there for joining us today for our first Sunday session for November. We'll wrap it up and we'll talk to you all later. Thanks. Bye.